Welcome to AGAPE Social Justice, where we focus on love, truth, and justice. On today's episode, we are going to talk about redemption. And this redemption story is one that's going to be a little bit unique in terms of who we're talking about needs redemption and how the story unfolds. Back in January of this year, there were some things that happened in the community, and I got involved. I spoke out. A number of people got engaged, and I didn't expect that I would be where I am today in terms of having a conversation, not only with the community, but having a conversation with Michigan Supreme Court Justice Bernstein, who is actually my in-studio guest today. So what I'm going to ask you to do, as I always do, reach out, call someone, tell them to turn on this episode, because this is a story of redemption that you're going to want to hear. Justice Bernstein, thank you so much for joining us today.
Are you kidding? I am so happy to be with you, and I have to say, I really applaud and admire all the work that you do.
Thank you.
In the last couple of months, the things that we had a chance to do together, and I have the opportunity to kind of see you in action in with your passion, with your energy, with your sincerity. And I just want to tell you, it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be on your program today, because I see you on the ground. I see the work that you do, and I've had a chance to be a part of it. So being with you like I am today is very exciting.
Thank you.
You're so good.
Thank you. I appreciate
you're
that.
So humble about it. But the thing is that especially the last couple of months with everything we've worked on together, I see you in action, and I have to tell your audience, she is outstanding at what she does, and she makes a difference every day for countless numbers of people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I remember when we first met, actually, at Noah Arbit's swearing in ceremony, and we had an opportunity to speak after that ceremony and talked a little bit about the facilitation I do, and you were leaning in and curious about it. So I really appreciate you giving that level of encouragement.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's my pleasure, and all I can tell you is I'm excited that, we're going to have a chance to work on more things together.
Yes.
And sometimes, which we're going to get into, but sometimes there are certain incidents that unfortunately, start off in a challenged way, but in the end, it turns out to be a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And a lot of times, really good things come out of it.
Yes.
Like new friendships being made, new relationships being established, people coming together in ways that they otherwise wouldn't have, and paths connecting in ways that, but for an unfortunate incident, never would have occurred.
But for the grace of God,
Exactly.
And now
I have a chance to become closer with you.
Absolutely.
Because of this situation.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I think that can be kind of a blessing.
I think it is a blessing. And for most people who come on the show, they talk about their journey, where they started, what their background is. And most of them have gone through experiences that were very, very challenging to overcome. But then the beauty of that is that they ended and they tell us where they are today and how other people can do the same.
Right.
So for you, let's get started.
Okay.
Tell our listening audience, who is Richard Bernstein?
Well,
where are you from?
Sure. So I'm blind from birth. I've been a Michiganian my entire life, and have now started my second term on the Michigan Supreme Court. And my entire life has really always been dedicated to service. And I've always focused on trying to do work that will make life better for people. And the reason, and we'll get into this, of course, but one of the main reasons that I ran to the Supreme Court was to deal with exonerations and make sure the system worked for everybody. And that was really my passion. And we can talk about certain cases and case law that we've gotten into, but I really got involved in this because I genuinely wanted to make life better for people with disabilities, special needs populations, and I just wanted to make sure that the system worked for folks. Right. And honestly, the biggest thing that I was most focused on was wrongful conviction. And my opinions really focus on issues of wrongful conviction. And also, the other thing that I've always been passionate about is juvenile life. Juvenile life cases. I know the key opinions on those that I was very proud of, that ultimately allowed for juveniles that were convicted and sentenced to life to have an opportunity to seek parole and release. And the opinions that I wrote on that are things I'm proud of, because you see it firsthand in so many great leaders in our community. Folks that, but for these opinions that allowed for release on juvenile life cases, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to spend time or get to know, or in many situations have that chance to really become close with some incredible people in our community.
Right.
And that's what I like to do, and that's the work that I'm a part of.
So, how did you even get interested in criminal justice? Was there a moment when you realized this is the work that I want to do?
I think it came from my friend Ken Winemko, who was wrongfully incarcerated, wrongfully convicted. He was an exoneree, and I saw kind of what happened and how it happened to him. And I think that really encouraged me and inspired me to, in many ways, run for this position to make sure that cases like the Ken Winemko situation don't continue to happen. But unfortunately, it does. And it's a huge part of what happens within the system. I think there's this percentage part of the Department of Justice that says 15% of people who are currently incarcerated are innocent of the crime. So these are things that we have to pay very close attention to. I mean, there's a lot of issues within criminal justice that have to be paid attention to, but the most important one is the issue of wrongful conviction and what happens as a result of wrongful conviction and how easy it is to have wrongful conviction because of the disparity that exists within the resources that people have to put on a case. The government has unlimited resources. The person who's standing trial doesn't have the level of resources that the government has. And so ultimately, these are things that we have to really look at, understand, and appreciate better. Is why do we have wrongful convictions? Why does this occur? And there's a litany of reasons as to why it happens. But the reason that I became a judge was to work on these issues and hopefully try to make things better as it pertains to them.
I feel your passion when you speak about this issue, and you've been known for many years in the community as someone who is passionate about this. You've worked very closely with a number of different organizations, community organizations who advocate for criminal justice. They've spoken very highly of you over the years. Just for full transparency to our audience, there was a time in January where things got pretty intense with you in that community. And, one of the things that I've wanted our listening audience to know is that there was a lot of work happening in the background, right? There were a lot of conversations, there were a lot of meetings, there were a lot of tears. There was a lot of conversation that was uncomfortable and challenging to have. And, I happened to, I had to go out of town for work. So I wasn't able to be at a healing session that you had with some of my friends who are community leaders, they're pastors, they're criminal justice activists. And one of the things that I heard from them is that they had no doubt in their mind that once you left that session with them, that healing circle that you have with them, they had no doubt of knowing who you are as a man and that you were committed and still committed to the passion and the dedication that you had when you started. Is there anything that you want to share in terms of what you've learned since everything unfolded in January in
Absolutely.
that healing circle?
I mean, what I learned was that basically what I learned is that this is now my new passion. Is I had been very focused on wrongful conviction, and I had been very focused on the issue of exoneration, but I hadn't been as focused on the notion of returning citizens. And this is something that now I have a tremendous passion for. I have a tremendous energy and intensity for. I'd always been aware of the issue, but I'd always I'd always distinguished between exoneration and returning citizens. And I realized that that can never happen again. And that ultimately, when you're talking about returning citizens, we have to make sure that they have opportunities. We have to make sure that they are welcome. We have to make sure that they're able to be a part of the community. The thing that was so interesting about this incident was I'm a disabled person, and my entire life has been devoted to inclusion. Right. If you were to ask, why am I so disappointed with myself, right? Like, What is it about myself that I am so disappointed in? It's the fact that I would actually do anything that would not be inclusive. In the notion that I would participate in something that, or say anything that would not focus on inclusivity is not who I am. It doesn't represent who I am at all. There's just certain confluences of events that wind up happening or wind up taking place, and ultimately you regret that forever. But it doesn't represent who you are, what you believe, what your passion is, and what your love is. And ultimately, just kind of focusing on this issue is, I would say, since this incident in January occurred, I will tell you that I have met with every person that was either quoted, that was at a meeting, that had an issue, that had a concern. Everyone that I could meet with, that I was able to meet with, I have met with. Every organization that asked for any time or a meeting to express concerns, I have and continue to meet with, literally on a daily basis. And the reason for that is I want to make sure that everybody is heard. And then on top of that, I want to take from that and allow for something good to come out of this. Allow for something positive to come out of this. Allow for something that is going to have an impact on people to come out of this. Because why have a situation that's just unfortunate and just sad if you can translate that or transfer it into something that has meaning and has purpose and that will ultimately create change and make life better for folks? And honestly, when it comes to the issue of returning citizens, this is my passion, to make sure that returning citizens have these opportunities, to make sure that they have rights, but most importantly, to make sure that it never happens again that a returning citizen is ever excluded from anything. Because ultimately, you don't ever want to take hope away from people who have done what they've been asked to do. You never want to take that away. And the notion that, unfortunately, my unfortunate comments resulted in that is unacceptable. Cannot and will not ever happen again. But most importantly is I will take from this experience and really learn from it. But most importantly, what I will say is, over the last couple of months, in every meeting that I've had, it's been a tremendous learning process. And I will have to say that I have met some returning citizens that I am proud to call my friends.
That's great.
I have met returning citizens that I am proud to say I'm friends with, that I am proud to go places with, that I am proud to do things with, that I am proud to spend time with. I have met some extraordinary returning citizens that, but for this incident, I never would have met. And I want to tell you something. I'm proud to call them my friends. And my only prayer is that I hope and pray that they will be willing to call me their friend the way that I call them my friend, from what I've learned and what I've experienced having the chance to be with them.
I love it. I love the fact that, first of all, from my perspective at least, you and your team never ran away, right? You never ran away. You didn't push back. You made yourself available. And for me, I actually had the opportunity to have you in person with the community. And one of the reasons why they wanted to do that is because, people feel something when they're in proximity to you, right? When they can be in the room and be present with you, they're looking for the vulnerability. They're looking for the authenticity, right? They're looking to hear the apology. And we live in a culture, this is no shock to you, right? We live in a culture where a lot of politicians never confront issues, right? You may or may not ever get an apology. And so for me, I don't take that lightly. And I just want to publicly acknowledge to you that I appreciate the fact that you have shown up, that you've continued to take the meetings and the phone calls. There's still work to be done, right? For all of us, there are always things that we're still learning, and so we can grow. But it means a lot that you showed up. You're a Michigan Supreme Court Justice, right? And you've taken the time to talk to everyday citizens who don't always get that opportunity. So just wanted to make sure that I did extend that thank you to you as well.
That's my job, right? I made a mistake. I made a comment that I shouldn't have. And honestly, when you do that, you have to own it. And I think the key is that there's key things that I think go into it, right? Is that you're absolutely right. What I think a lot of people would have done, politicians, judges, whoever, is you just disappear.
Right.
And you just move on and ignore it, and that's it, right? Because the terms are so long, you can just like, okay, well, I'll just move past it. But this is a community that I love. This is a community that I cherish. These are people that I truly love. These are people that I dedicate my life to. I mean, this is a community that I just have a genuine love for it. So even though it might not have been the most politically smart thing to do, to basically admit that you were wrong, admit that you made a mistake, own it, which is what I fully did, right? I admitted it, I owned it. It's not always the easiest thing politically to do because you don't want people to say, so you were wrong and you're admitting that you're wrong. I admitted that I was wrong. I acknowledged that I was wrong. I told everybody that I was wrong.
And how would you help other elected officials or even people who are running for office to understand that concept of the ownership and to be able to be vulnerable in that way?
That's not something they're going to do. You have to be, this is something, it's just because I care so deeply about this community and I care so deeply about the people that were impacted and the people that were affected that I went against all political norms and political advice and took a very unique position, which was, again, to apologize, but most importantly, to own it, right? And didn't say but and yes and if and all that kind of stuff. It was just a direct apology. And then go right into the community, into the community, to the people that were the most affected and the people that were the most impacted, and go right in. You know what I mean? Most people would have said, that's not the best, that's going to be very intense and difficult. But my attitude was, no, I owe it to these folks that were hurt by my comment. And as a result, it required me to go right in. Right in immediately. Right in. Even when it couldn't be more intense, it was very important to do that because the most important thing was to ensure and allow for everyone to have a chance to be heard.
Yes.
That was critical.
Yes. Critical. Being heard is like, to me, one basic step that we can all take so that we can be able to repair harm and then we can be able to grow in relationship with one another. It helps us even in growing our own identity and then being able to take action to do some of the things that we need to get done, right? Which you and I are going to talk about later with some of that. And one of the things that also came up was also the conversation with women, right? So there's one part, the conversation with individuals who are formerly incarcerated, but then there were women too. What have you learned in regard to that, and have you been able to talk to some of the organizations that promote women's rights and things?
Absolutely. And again, I think the key is that under no circumstance would I ever mean any disrespect. It's just not my nature, right? It's just not who I am. But at the same time, the key is I think what it comes down to is making sure and going above and beyond, which I think what you would hear is hopefully a lot of the folks that we've met with and spent time with have actually said that we've gone above and beyond in terms of trying to make things right. The most important thing is trying to have a more heightened respect for how things might be perceived, especially in the workplace. And I think one of the things that you really take away from this and have a heightened understanding and appreciation of is the challenges that African American women face, the challenges that they face in the community, in the workplace, at home. I have learned so much as it pertains to these struggles that African American women have to face and have to contend with, because they have to deal with a level of scrutiny and a level of challenge and a level of prejudice and a level of discrimination that's twofold. A, women being a woman, and second, being African American.
Right.
And so they have to be, it's even more challenging and even more difficult because of, the circumstance or situation. And I think, what this highlights is that even if something was never intended or never meant to have an impact or an effect, you have to be much more focused and understanding as to what the implication can ultimately be. But one of the things that I can tell you is, especially as it pertains to African American women, is they're the backbone of the city. They're the backbone of our state. They're the backbone of everything, right? Nothing happens without the support of African American women, because at the end of the day, they are the literal backbone. They are the structure. They are the glue. They are the foundation. They are the everything that allows for things to work and for things to happen in any manner or in any way. And I think, especially from this experience, it's that complete, whole appreciation and understanding for the role of African American women in our workplaces, in our society, in our communities, and how that has to be highly respected, highly admired,
Right.
highly acknowledged, highly appreciated, to a heightened and more appropriate level.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that, because the struggle is real.
Yeah.
Right? The struggle
Yes, it
is real. And I think that's what really struck a nerve for people, is that I think it gave us an opportunity also to kind of tell the public, like, how hard it really is. Like, we tell you, but like, you really, need to hear us. And I've been having conversations with people lately who say, I can't believe it's 2023 and we're still talking about the first this, the first that for African Americans. And as you know, in Michigan, one of the things that we're really proud of is that we have our first African American female who is now a Supreme Court Justice with Kyra Bowden.
Correct.
I don't know that we still even understand the gravity of that, to be honest. There's a lot, I see a lot. March was reading month. And so last month I saw pictures of schools that were bringing her in, and there are all these wonderful things to highlight the history. This is also kind of part of your history too, in a way. With being on the Supreme Court with her. I know we're going to go into a part 2 with this, but I wanted to just ask you, like, what do you think about us having our first African American female justice? Like, if you had to share what that experience has been like in the Michigan Supreme Court, what would you say?
I think it's about time. And I think the reason it's so important is because you have to have that diversity of experience. You have to have people at the table that have varied life experiences, because the more life experiences that people have, the more they're able to impact decisions and have an effect on the court.
Right.
So it's fundamentally critical, because the more that you have people from varied backgrounds who have these experiences, the more you're going to have decisions that reflect the community as a whole. And that's why it's critical, and that's why it's important, and that's why it's so significant, and that's why it means so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. We have a lot of conversations in my circles about the importance of making sure that diverse voices are at the table, right? Because all of us have different lived experiences, and there are certain things that you and I still yet don't know and don't understand about one another. I actually interviewed my pastor, who happens to be part of the Asian American community, and we've also talked a lot about learning about one another and wanting to make sure that we have this connectedness and that we lock arms with one another. And one of the things that I hope is a result of what you and I experienced, and many of our community members, is that we can find a way to lock arms, right? And we can find a way to promote that message of sharing our diverse viewpoints and diversifying those critical roles that happen within our criminal justice system, and that including people who are formerly incarcerated. So I'm really grateful that we started this conversation. I do want us to also talk about some of the conversations that you've had that haven't been shared yet with the public, some of the things that you're actually going to do in terms of making a difference in this space, and then highlighting some of the cases that you've done that have made a significant impact on people, even people in my personal life. But we're just going to pause for a moment. We'll do that in part two. To our listening audience, I just want to encourage you to not only take time to listen to what Justice Bernstein is sharing about this experience that occurred in January, because think about times in your life when you've gone through a situation that was very difficult for you to acknowledge and to have to own and to talk about. Most of us have never even had to talk about it publicly, let alone acknowledge it and own it. And so one of the things that we do on Agape Social Justice, and particularly in the month of April, is that we're talking about second chances. We talk about redemption. We talk about God's love. And so I wanted to have this conversation today so that we can understand that as we advocate for many people who are part of the criminal justice system, there have been wrongs that have been committed, but there's also an opportunity for us to be able to show redemption to people who have made mistakes, because that's what this is all about, right? And so as I go through this journey in my own personal life and I reflect on, my advocacy and the work that I do, I'm always looking for, God, what is it that you want me to do in terms of taking that next step and showing your love to our brothers and sisters. And so my call to action to you as we close out for this first segment is for you to really ask yourself, look in the mirror and say, is there any harm that has been done? Are there any relationships that I have with people? And we need to reconcile. There's redemption that needs to take place. And I ask you to be that person to take that first step, make the phone call, send the text, invite them out. And how can you repair harm? How can you discuss something that's uncomfortable and difficult? Because guess what? You're going to model how we can create a society to do that as you do it in those personal relationships, within your household and your family, and within your community. And then I want you to share that with us. Go to our social media pages, Agape Social Justice on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, Agape Social Just on Twitter. Let us know how that's working out for you, and then let's keep this conversation going. Tune in next week as Justice Bernstein takes us through the next phase of the journey and where he is today. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining.